Okay. Yes. So thank you for having me. I'll be talking about de-anonymizing Ethereum validators in the peer-to-peer network. My name is Lioba, and this is joint work with Jan, Juan, Luciana, and Roger. And three of them are actually also around here. So if you have questions, you can go to them. So how does the Ethereum peer-to-peer network look on a very high level? So we have the nodes that connect to each other, and then they exchange blocks and consensus messages. And the node here is just a participant in the peer-to-peer network who has a unique ID, so an IP port connection. And then some of these nodes, they also choose to participate in the consensus by running validators. They could run one of them or multiple, and a validator is just an entity in charge of consensus, and it has a unique ID per 32 ETH of stake, or at least it used to be 32 ETH of stake. Now it could also be more. Now, why would we care about anonymity in this network? Well, we could look at one potential example, which is that in Ethereum, we know the scheduler is due to make block proposals well ahead of time. So let's imagine the schedule would be that there's validator 7 proposing a block, then it would be validator 1, and finally it would be validator 4. Now let's also imagine that at the time where validators 1's block is due to be proposed, there's some really high value transaction, some type of MEV, like a sandwich attack, for example. And let's also think of our validator 4 being malicious. It wants this profit related to this value for themselves. So what could it do? Well, it could try to it could first try to identify validator 1 in the network, so figure out the IP address of the node it's running from, and then it could try to perform an attack on validator 1, so for example, a DOS attack, thereby taking validator 1 out, preventing it from making the proposal, and then essentially scooping the profits related to the high value transactions that were supposed to be in validator 1's block. Now, this would be one example as to why privacy in the Ethereum peer-to-peer network would be good to have. But what does it look like today? So Ethereum, when it moved from proof of work to proof of stake, and the load on the network just increased because of all these consensus messages that were now being passed around, they decided to divide the attestation propagation into 64 subnets. So these subnets, what they achieve is an immense reduction in message complexity and the load of the network. But the question really becomes is, do we give up any privacy sort of as a trade-off for this load reduction that was introduced by these subnets? Or to put it differently, are the validator locations in the peer-to-peer network private these days? And the answer is no, essentially. So in this talk, I will not go over the details as to how we were able to de-anonymize validators with help of information we get through these subnets. You can look at the paper for that. I will essentially just show you the results of what we then did when we deployed this attack in practice. So with 3 days of data and 4 nodes we were running and quite conservative heuristics, we were able to de-anonymize 160 validators. And this is around 16% of the Ethereum peer-to-peer network. We de-anonymized part of the network, a quite significant chunk with the amount of data we had, but we can also then draw some observations about the distribution of validators across nodes, so across peers in the network and across the globe. So let's look at how validators are distributed across peers. I'm showing a CDF for that, and essentially what you can take away from this is that for the majority of nodes or peers, they're really only running a handful of validators, but there's around 30% of them that are actually running more than 100 validators on their machines. So these are no longer small players, I would say. And which came as quite a surprise to us is that the most validators we were able to locate on a single machine, so the number of validators running from a single peer in the network was more than 19,000. Then we also zoomed into the 5 largest staking pools. So this CDF is just for the peers that are running validators from these 5 staking pools. And there, for one, we can see, of course, they're running more validators on average. But the more interesting thing is that we see this interesting ladder effect, where we, for example, see quite a lot of them running exactly 1,000 validators. So this is likely some node operator configuration. Then what we also find, and which was surprising to us, that there are nodes that run validators for multiple staking pools. The way this can happen is that these staking pools, they ask node operators to run their validators, so they don't always run them themselves. But these node operators, they service multiple staking pools. And we find instances of these node operators then running validators from multiple staking pools on the same machine. And this is quite undesirable because it creates dependencies between seemingly independent entities. Now, when we look where validators are located across the globe, we really see that around 80% of those that we de-anonymize are in Europe and in the US, and this is sort of data that would be expected. But what we also see is now in our de-anonymizations here, you see sort of the overall de-anonymizations in pink for each of the 10 biggest countries, and then individually for the machines where we were de-anonymizing from. They are in Frankfurt, Seoul, Virginia, and Zurich. And we really see that validators, that the nodes are better at de-anonymizing validators in geographically close by regions. So the Zurich machine in Europe, in blue here, is very good at de-anonymizing validators in Europe. And the Virginia machine in green, for example, has the biggest share in the US. Now, finally, let's also look at where these validators are running from. So which organizations. I'm showing the biggest 10 on the slide here. And around 90% of validators are running through cloud providers. And the biggest chunk of them are running from Amazon data centers, so around 20%. Yes, so this wraps it up. I gave a talk this morning about this already. I'm sorry if you had to listen to both. But if you still want more details, you can scan the QR code and go to the paper.
Questions?
Great.
What exactly constitutes de-anonymizing a validator? Is it knowing their IP address?
Yeah, essentially like figuring out where they're running from, the IP port combination, the IP address of the machine they're on.
All right, thank you.
More questions? Amazing.
Thanks. I was wondering, so because there is quite a lot of collocation of validators within a single physical machine, and I guess in this case they will subscribe to every single subnet per validator.
The subnet subscription is per node.
Per node.
It's not per validator. I mean, there's some indirect subscription when a validator has aggregation duty, but sort of the two subnets that you need to maintain, that's currently per node, so per client you're running.
Okay, great. Thank you.
How do I make my node anonymous? What were the nodes that you couldn't anonymize doing right?
You could maintain very bad connections. It probably wouldn't be good for you, but you can do some other things as well. Like you can, I don't know, for instance, run two nodes, one for attestations, one for proposals. The one with proposals will be anonymous. It doesn't generate enough data, I would very much presume, to be able to ever de-anonymize it, essentially. You could form some private peering agreements, these sorts of things. But yeah, on the other hand, you could also be fine with you not being anonymous and investing in network layer defenses.
Thank you.
Oh, great.
Okay. The nodes, it seems like the places where you deployed the Rainbow nodes had were mostly in Europe and US. So it seems the 80% metric was a little biased based on where they were deployed. Do you think that they're actually I don't know. Did you think it's a little bit skewed because of that? Or like if you had deployed more in Asia, for instance, do you think you would see more de-anonymization in Asia also?
We have the same number in Asia as in the US, which is one.
Okay.
The Seoul one is in the US.
I guess you had a lot of Europe.
In
Yeah.
Asia, sorry. But yes, our data is skewed towards Europe, I would say, not towards the US, because for reasons we are not too sure about, our Zurich node was amazing at doing de-anonymizations, and the others just weren't as amazing.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
And again, for those groups. So as a node, can you choose which groups do you subscribe to? Is it like free, or is it based on some identifier, or is it deterministic, or is it free for you to choose the groups you subscribe to?
The subnets you subscribe to?
Yeah.
Sorry. I believe, I'm not sure whether you can change it well, I guess you can change every client software, so you can change it, but clients are nodes are randomly assigned to 2 subnets. They seem to always be consecutive, and then they rotate every now and then. But I guess if you go in, you can go change it. You can also, for example, configure that you want to be a part of all subnets.
But so would it be helping if I would subscribe to the groups where my validator is sending the attestation for? Just to hide within those like lines that you showed during the first talk.
Your validator is sending an attestation, I guess, from a different subnet every 6 minutes. So you would need to adjust it every 6 minutes. You could do that, but maybe through that you're de-anonymizing yourself as well in some sense.
Got it. Thank you.